Hi, and welcome to episode 5 of Full Moon Film Buff. This week we are talking about the absolutely amazing 1941 film The Wolfman. This is the movie that made me a werewolf fan. I saw it when I was 7 or 8 years old. We have got a lot to talk about here, so buckle up, settle down, and enjoy. First, let's talk about the prominent crew and cast. This film was directed by George Wagner, written by Kurt Siodmak, and the special effects were done by Jack Pierce. George Wagner is certainly most well known for The Wolfman. He served in World War I before coming to Hollywood. In the 1960s, he moved from cinema to television, directing episodes of the great television series Maverick, Batman, The Green Hornet, and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Kurt Siodmak was a German-born writer who fled the Nazis before World War II. He and his wife were cast as extras in Fritz Lang's masterpiece Metropolis. Thanks to the massive success of The Wolfman and his 1942 sci-fi novel Donovan's Brain, Kurt wrote mostly sci-fi and horror his entire career. Jack Pierce is a towering pioneer of special effects makeup, arguably one reason Universal dominated horror in the 1930s and 1940s. Jack was responsible, in whole or in part, for designing Dracula for Bela Lugosi in 1931, Frankenstein's Monster in 1931, and The Mummy in 1932 for Boris Karloff, The Bride of Frankenstein, including the iconic hair, for Elsa Lanchester in 1935, Igor for Bela Lugosi again in 1939, The Wolfman for Lon Chaney Jr. in 1941, and The Phantom of the Opera for Claude Rains in 1943. Just a staggering creative genius. Jack was reportedly a cranky guy to work with and something of a perfectionist. Those two probably go together. He wore an iconic white surgeon's smock while working, making him look like one of the mad scientists from the movies he worked on. On to the cast. Lon Chaney Jr. played Lawrence Talbot, aka the Wolfman. Claude Rains played Sir John Talbot, Larry's father. Ralph Bellamy plays Colonel Montford. Warren Williams plays Dr. Lloyd. Patrick Knowles plays Frank Andrews. Bela Lugosi plays Bella. Maria Ospinskaya plays Maleva. And Evelyn Ankers plays Gwen Conlife. One interesting tidbit is that Lon Chaney Jr. is the only actor to play the iconic monster he originated in all sequels Universal made to the original. He was not named after his father, and the stage name was assigned by the studio. At first, they left off the Junior in a deliberate attempt to confuse audiences. He was originally billed as Lon Chaney on The Wolfman. He had a complex relationship with his father, whom he always felt was more famous than himself, and never did love the stage name. His birth name was Creighton. Claude Rains is another horror movie staple with a differently prestigious degree. Claude was Royal Academy trained and was an instructor there before coming to Broadway and Hollywood. He blew up in Hollywood in Universal's 1933 The Invisible Man. Unlike many other horror film stars, Claude continued to have great success on Broadway and in more respected Hollywood films, including Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and Casablanca. Bela Lugosi was a prolific actor in his native Hungary, now Romania, on the stage and in silent films. He had to emigrate, eventually to America, as a result of the tense political situations in Eastern Europe. From 1927 to 1929, Bela starred as Count Dracula in a Broadway adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel. This led directly to starring in the 1931 film version of Dracula. Through the 1930s, he occupied an important niche in horror films. However, his recognizable face and ominous thick Hungarian accent marked him as Count Dracula, greatly limiting the roles offered to him. He unsuccessfully tried for years to escape typecasting. Medical complications related to Bela's service in World War I ultimately led to pain medication addiction. Maria Ospinskaya was trained by Konstantin Stanislavski and taught method acting in America. Apparently, her astrology obsession and her staunch acting method made her a challenge to work with. Evelyn Ankers was a staple of 1940s-era Universal horror films, often cast as Lon Chaney Jr.'s love interest, despite the pair not really getting along. Now, let's switch gears and discuss an actor who had a bigger impact off-screen. Ralph Bellamy was one of the founders of the Screen Actors Guild and served 4 terms as president of Actors Equity from 1952 to 1964. He presided during the troubled period known as McCarthyism. He positioned Actors' Equity and Broadway theater to the left of Hollywood by resisting blacklisting. Many blacklisted in Hollywood found work in the theater. Under Ralph, Actors' Equity established standards to protect members against charges of Communist Party membership or exhibiting left-wing sympathies. Look, I'm not a neutral observer here. I love The Wolfman. I am a huge Lon Chaney Jr. fan. While Werewolf of London might have set the template for an old school werewolf movie, The Wolfman is what really knocked this into the stratosphere. And I'm not the only one who feels this way. This movie has glowing reviews from critics and fans as well. This movie and its sequels really solidified a lot of the tropes that werewolf movies have stuck to for decades. So, yes, I recommend you watch this movie. Pause this video, go watch it, come back when you're done. It's tame by today's standards, but it's still great, even though it's over 80 years old. Watch The Wolfman. Now, I'm going to cover the synopsis. I really do love this movie, and I really do think you should watch it, so this is your last warning. Our hero, Lawrence Talbot, returns to his ancestral home in Llanwelly, Wales, to reconcile with his estranged father, Sir John Talbot. Larry's older brother died in a hunting accident, and Larry must assume the role of heir. Larry becomes infatuated with a local woman named Gwen Conliffe, who works at her family's antique shop. As a pretext to talk to her, he purchases a walking stick decorated with a silver wolf's head. Gwen tells him it symbolizes a werewolf, a man who changes into a wolf at certain times of the year. The werewolf always sees a pentagram on the palm of his next victim. Though Gwen refuses Larry's very persistent proposals for a date, she does meet him that night at the proposed time, bringing along her friend Jenny to go have their fortunes told. Bella, the Romani fortune teller, sees a pentagram when he examines Jenny's palm and urgently sends her away. While waiting, Larry and Gwen take a walk. Gwen informs Larry she is engaged. They hear Jenny scream. Larry rushes to Jenny's rescue, who is being attacked by a wolf. He kills the wolf with his new walking stick, but is bitten on the chest. Police investigating the scene find Jenny's throat torn out and Bella's body battered to death. Larry's walking stick is clearly the murder weapon in the latter case. Suspicion on Larry deepens when he cannot prove his story of fighting a wolf, since his wound has miraculously healed and there is no wolf body. The fact that Larry and Gwen were alone together when Jenny was attacked raises rumors of promiscuity. Larry and Gwen become pariahs. Bella's mother, Mileva, reveals to Larry that the wolf which bit him was Bella while in the form of a wolf, and informs Larry that he is now a werewolf. Silver is a werewolf's only weakness, so lucky Larry happened to have a silver club on him, wasn't it? Mileva gives him a charm that should prevent the transformation. Unwilling to believe Mileva, Larry gives the charm to Gwen for protection instead. Just as Mileva warned, Larry transforms into a humanoid wolf hybrid the following night and kills a villager. He returns to human form next morning with no memory of the night, though he left a set of tracks leading to the Talbot Manor. Authorities believe the killing to be the work of a wolf. They set traps and send out hunting parties. The next night, Larry again turns into a werewolf and steps into a trap. Mileva uses a spell to temporarily change him back to human form, allowing him to free himself before he can be found. Convinced now that he actually is a werewolf, a distraught Larry decides that he must leave town. When he says goodbye to Gwen, he sees a pentagram on her palm. He tells his father he is a werewolf and killed Bella and the villager. Sir Talbot thinks Larry is delusional and ties him to a chair to prove to Larry that he cannot be a werewolf. When the moon rises, Larry transforms, breaks free, and attacks Gwen. Not recognizing the monster as his own son, Larry's father bludgeons him over the head with his own silver-headed cane. Mileva arrives and uses her spell again. Sir John watches in horror as the dead werewolf transforms into Larry's very human corpse. Now don't fret, the film was so popular that Larry Talbot was resurrected and brought back several times. We'll discuss Lon Chaney Jr. again. Additionally, The Wolfman got rebooted in the 21st century, so even after we're done talking about Lon Chaney Jr., we'll eventually come back to Lawrence Talbot. We finally get to see the magnificent makeup designed by Jack Pierce, originally for Werewolf of London, but used here on Lon Chaney in The Wolfman. It's a pretty significant step up from the minimalist approach used in Werewolf of London. However, a lot of the tales that you've probably or maybe heard about the application of this makeup are exaggerations, like tall tales, or maybe more accurately, like the historical legends of werewolves themselves. Chaney's face is almost completely covered in yak fur, leaving only his haunted human eyes for him to express his emotions, which he does very well. He wears custom-made boots made out of rubber, coated with yak fur, that force him to walk on his tiptoes, giving his legs something of that look of a wolf's leg, right, with the long extended reverse ankle, helping him cut a different silhouette than a human being. However, we don't really get a transformation scene. The old standard dissolve is used to move through stages of the makeup from no makeup to full makeup. Lon Chaney, you would say in later life that he had to sit still for hours during these transformation scenes, even saying at one point that finishing nails were used to hold his hand in place. That's almost certainly not true. It did take hours to do, but they would use a plaster mold so that he could get his head into the exact same position every time. And additionally, they would trace an outline on a glass plane that they could use for reference to make sure that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. However, it is true that Lon Chaney, Jack Pierce, and the rest of the crew would have to work 10 hours to capture something that would show up for seconds on film. And that's going to continue. Doing a werewolf transformation is not easy. It still isn't easy today, and it still takes time, and it's still a real labor of love for all those involved. This is the first time that we hear of silver being useful against a werewolf. In fact, in this movie, silver is the only thing that can kill a werewolf. There are hints about the full moon, although this movie is not explicit. Further movies in this series will get explicit that the transformation occurs only at a full moon. While in wolf form, the werewolf is stronger, is faster, is tougher, and is immune to most damage. And is driven by a lust to kill, which is a common trope, like I said, that this film helps cement. Let's talk about the themes. One thing that really shocked me as I watched this movie is just how open and honest Larry is about his condition. I can't think of a single time he lies to try and protect himself. Now, he doesn't tell people when he first learns that he might be a werewolf, but that's because he doesn't believe he's a werewolf. Once he's convinced, he's telling everybody that he can. He's telling his father. He's trying to find people to help him protect others from himself. But they don't believe him, which brings us to an interesting consequence. Larry's an outsider. He's not from here. He hasn't been around here for a long time, and he's telling this fantastical tale. Because he's an outsider and they don't believe him, that's what allows the tragedy to happen. Larry wants to do the right thing. He tries to do the right thing, and others won't let him, and people die because of it. This is part of what makes Larry Talbot such a compelling and sympathetic werewolf. He really is trapped. He really does want a way out. He's not trying to use this. He's not trying to protect himself. He wants what's best for the community, but the community won't let him. They won't believe him. As Larry Talbot grapples with his monstrous nature, there are also themes raised about social alienation and otherness. The film touches on Larry's struggles to be believed and to be understood. Even those who are close to him, who love him, can't accept what he's saying about himself because it's just so fantastical and crazy. The film explores the struggles that people go through when society refuses to accept them as they deviate from social norms, and the challenges and the tragic consequences that can come from that. Larry is falsely accused of lying, both when it comes to his turning into werewolves, but also when it comes to his relationship with Gwen. The injustice only increases the tragedy. Another theme of this movie deals with nobility. Larry Talbot is coming back to his hometown in order to assume his role as heir. His father, Sir John Talbot, cannot conceive of a world where there isn't a Lord Talbot. And that's part of why he protects his son. Not because he's protecting a monster. He doesn't actually believe his son is a monster. In fact, he can't accept that his son might be a monster, because if his son is, well, then there's not going to be a Lord Talbot, and that's just not something that he can process. In comparison, Larry acts much more nobly. He is the one that's concerned about the community that they're supposed to be caring for and looking out after. He's the one who is willing to sacrifice on behalf of the community. And that's an interesting juxtaposition there between the two. There's a flip side to this protection as well. Mileva is protecting her son Bella. For how long, we don't know, but he's been turning into a werewolf. She knows what he is. Now, it's possible that she's been doing so by using her magic. We see her use that magic, and so it's entirely possible that she's used that magic to help her son deal with his condition, and for whatever reason, she wasn't able to this time. But I believe Bella probably killed before, and Mileva knows that, but she's willing to protect her son because she's trying to protect her community. She knows that the Romani people that she's a part of are outsiders. They are often blamed for tragedy and bad fortune. And she knows that if her son kills someone, that her people will be blamed. And so she tries to cover for him. She tries to protect him, not only to protect her loved one, but to protect her society as well. Yet another theme that this movie explores, I told you there were a lot here, is the fear of the unknown. Larry doesn't understand what's happening to him. No one understands what's happening to him. And in fact, even from the interactions that he has with Mileva, she doesn't explain where this came from. Who was the first werewolf? Why does this happen? No one knows. And Larry doesn't know what he's going to do. And that's terrifying. He knows that he is going to turn into a monster that is going to act out violently and kill people. And there's nothing he can do about that. He doesn't know who he's going to kill all the time, although the pentagram gives him some clues. That fear of the unknown is a deeply seated human fear. It's one that we all have. And this movie really lets us look at that and examine how would we behave when we don't know that we can trust our own thoughts, our own feelings, and more importantly, our own actions. Finally, let's talk about how this film deals with fatalism, or fate. It seems to present the curse and what happens to Larry as a predetermined destiny. It was going to happen. The film presents the idea of the pentagram, the visible pentagram in the palm of the next victim, as evidence of the attack, right? Every single person that we know of that had the pentagram, well, except Gwen, even Gwen is attacked, right? Larry is going after her. She's only saved because Larry is killed. There doesn't seem to be presented a way out of this. So next episode, we're going to talk about cat people. But we've got an interesting problem coming up. We're running out, or not running out. We've got a lot of movies that I can stream, but we're getting to the point in the chronology where not all movies are on streaming services, and I'm going to need to get some DVDs. I've put together an Amazon wish list, and I'm going to include it in the film notes from this and every future episode. If you can and you want to support the channel, a great way to do that would be to buy one of those DVDs and send it my way. I promise that as soon as I get one, I will make that the next episode. But this is one way to help defray the costs of putting together this channel and putting together this content. Related to that note, I would like to improve and get better at putting together videos. This is a new experience and a new challenge for me. I'm trying various things, and hopefully you can hear and see those improvements. But I'm interested in your feedback, things that you think I could do, should do, ought to do, maybe suggestions for prioritizing what would be most important to you as a viewer. I can't promise that I will take any or all suggestions. Obviously, I'm going to be limited by budget, but knowing the kind of things that would make you, the viewer, most happy and see a bigger improvement in this would be helpful for me to know going forward. Finally, in conclusion, The Wolfman's amazing. One of my favorites. It might not have the greatest transformation that you're ever going to see. We'll get to those. It might not be the scariest. We'll get to those. But it is such a foundational movie, and it still functions. You still feel sorry for Larry. You still wish that there could be a better outcome. You still wish that he could have a happy ending. He doesn't. Now, don't fret. This movie was so popular that even though Larry dies at the end of it, he's coming back for some more sequels. Additionally, in the 21st century, they've remade and rebooted this franchise. So we're going to get to look at Larry Talbot from another perspective with a different performer later. But it'll be a while before we get there. So if you like werewolves, like and subscribe to this channel. Keep an eye on the moon and keep a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you next week.